Good morning, world. I'm Allie with The Right Place, Right Time, and this is another fabulous broadcast, open book broadcast, where we talk about anything and everything to do with publishing and all the things in between, and probably a little bit more because we digress, but in a really fun, candid, and authentic way. And I'm super pumped for today's conversation because it is all about feedback and constructive criticism. Because when you are writing a book, there is no way around getting some people's eyes on it and letting you know what's working and not working. And so for today, I'm really excited to have three of my favorite people in the publishing industry, all editors, joining me for this conversation, because who better to talk about providing feedback and giving criticism than them? So let me formally introduce who I have with me this morning, so that you know who's coming to the table for this conversation, and then we're going to dive right into it. So starting in no order of favoritism or preference, I love them all, but I'm just going off of my sheet over here. I'm going to begin by introducing Judy Ellis. Judy Ellis is the president of Daybreak Lit. She loves collaborating with authors on their dream writing projects. Her love for storytelling began when reading books by flashlight and watching old films as a kid. That love for story continued in daily newspapers, where she learned the power of storytelling to transform lives. She's worked for the Denver Post and the Dallas Morning News, written freelance articles for the Washington Post and AOL, and served twice on a Pulitzer Prize jury, including once as chair. So welcome, Judy, to this morning's conversation. Next, I have Fallon Clark. Fallon Clark is a freelance book coach and developmental editor serving fiction and creative nonfiction authors and memoirists. Her writing has been published in Flash Fiction magazine, and she writes a weekly advice column for Metastellar magazine. When not buried in a book, she's likely buried in soil and tending to the garden, her happy place. Fallon lives in Vermont with her family. Welcome, Fallon. And thank you for representing Vermont along here with me. And last but certainly not least, we have Kristy Boyd Johnson. Kristy Boyd Johnson is an award-winner writer who developed a serious interest in writing for kids and teens as a young adult, and is currently at work on book 2 in her new series, Lily Star Monster Hunter. Her love of writing led her to pursue an MFA in professional screenwriting. Over the years, she has ghostwritten over 30 nonfiction books for entrepreneurs. She now consults as a developmental book editor to help entrepreneurs turn their vast knowledge into books that sell. Welcome, Kristy. And I just want to put out there too, for the people who are joining us live or catching the replay, that every single one of these fabulous women also writes for themselves. So not only are they in the seat of providing feedback and constructive criticism, they also know what it means to be in the seat receiving it. All right. So they can speak as both authors and editors, which is truly a fascinating way to go about this conversation, being able to speak from both sides of the aisle. So we're going to jump in first by allowing each of today's guests to talk about what they do in the publishing space as an editor, and to tell us their secret sauce, like what differentiates them in the space when they're working with authors. So this is where you want to really be tuning in, because you might be meeting your next editor right here on today's broadcast. So I'll go in reverse order and start with Kristy. Kristy, tell us just a little bit about what you do as an editor and what makes you stand out from others.
Well, I always warn the writers that come to me that I am brutally honest. I tell them I have to be very honest with you about what's working and what's not working. And it's not because I hate you or I hate what you're doing. It's because if it's not working in the book, you're going to lose readers. And so my line is that, you know, the process of writing your book is about you, the author, but the book itself and its content is about the reader. So it has to resonate with the readers. It has to. Otherwise, they'll just go on to the next book, and you will lose whatever audience you might have been building. So that's my shtick. I like I don't hate you. I'm just honest, but I also try to be nurturing if they have, you know, one of their emotional crises or something, which happen, and I've had them. But I really appreciate it when readers don't lie to me and say, oh, it was fabulous, when it's not. And I know it's not. And I know there's a problem with it, but I can't see it. So tell me so I can see it and then I can fix it.
I love it. So she gives honesty and she also wants to get honesty. Also, I feel like there should be t-shirts that say, I don't hate you, I'm just honest. I feel like that can apply to so many things, like not just editing, but like life. Like, sorry that I was just blatantly honest, but like I was doing you a favor. You're welcome. Connect with Kristy on LinkedIn. I dropped her LinkedIn profile into the comments for folks. All right. Thanks, Kristy. I can't wait to hear what else you have to share with us today. All right. Fallon, tell us about your secret sauce and what you're doing out here in the editorial land.
Okay. So I want to be your book friend. I want to help you as a writer organize your thoughts and get your story into your words and in your voice, or the voice of your character in the case of fiction. And in the publishing space, my focus really is on bringing out that narrative perspective voice. Who is telling the story? Why are they telling the story? Why do they need to tell this story right now? And what's in it for them? Because what's in it for the narrator of the story is often what's in it for the reader of the story. And if those two are disconnected, the reader will be disconnected from the work. So when I'm working with authors, I'm really going to push them to dig into that perspective voice and answer those big, powerful questions about, why the narrator is telling the story and what they're getting out of it and what they want to do with that story. It's sort of an amazing place to be, but it does require, going back to the author and, forcing their hand a little bit, like get in there, pull out that emotion and go, dig deeper. I don't want your top level emotion. I don't want that superficial shit. I want the third layers. I want the fourth layers. I want you to pull those big feelings up from your ankles and bear them on the page. And so, a lot of what I do with authors in that space is forcing them to dig into that emotional layering that happens when you're spilling your story out on paper. It's big, it's uncomfortable, but it's totally necessary to make those connections with readers.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you said that. Because, flat reads flat, like, basic reads basic, and you don't get anywhere with that. Yep. You don't feel anything. You don't even, at some point you stop paying attention. Right. So authors need to go deeper, no matter their genre, really. Like they can't hang out up here where it's safe, or they're kind of missing the point. I love that. And I love, Fallon, too, that like you're also focusing on the reader experience in a slightly different way than I think how Kristy's entering it, but you're both really considering the fact that like the author is working on something that is going to be consumed by someone else. Yes. And so the someone else matters in the long run, not just what they want to say or do. Like how they do it is important, right? To reaching who's going to get it on the other side. Love that. We're going to talk more about that soon. Judy, tell us about you and what you're bringing to this space.
Let's start with saying that I think my secret sauce is I'm empathetic. I'm empathetic to the writer. And that is because when I was a reporter, I know what it was like to sit next to an editor and then to comb through your copy at the time and to say, did you get this? And did you get this? And did you get that? And that could be a good or a bad experience. So I do bring empathy, but at the same time, I bring that editor that sat next to me. And that person is empathetic, but is also saying, did you get this? And did you get that? And I'm looking for authenticity. When we were in the newsroom, one of the coolest things about the newsroom is you came in from the world and saw authentic events that were happening. You got more than one point of view. You spoke to a number of people. You gave us a sense of place. You gave us a sense of the time, how people sounded. And I think that transfers very well to book writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. What do you see? What's riding in your imagination? And I'm alongside you to make sure those things come out, but they must come out authentically. And they must come out as you saw them, as you experienced them. And so, like if someone's writing a memoir, what's really cool about fantastic memoirs is the level of authenticity that's there. It's the level of passion that's there. It's the pulling behind the curtain and the next curtain and the next curtain. And you're staying there and you're like, wow. And if you're walking with someone, with an editor who's empathetic, but also is is saying, give me all of it, there's a certain kind of mental intimacy that comes in. So the secret sauce is that empathy, but it's empathy to help as well as to encourage. So I try and do both. And then I think the other part of the secret sauce is to have fun with it. I want to have the same joy in a project as the writer who's doing the project. So you want to kind of bring that connection. I don't like to take them when I don't like it. If I can't really get into it, I like to step back. And then I want the third part is what Kristy and Fallon already said, and that is, who is your super fan? You should write for the person who's going to consume what you're saying. Again, using the newsroom example, we wrote for our readers. We told them what they needed to know. We made sure it included the documentation of whatever meeting or interview or protest or whatever that was going on. We had to say that because we knew someone was on the other end. So writing is a great personal experience. It's a great friendship to have between you and the editor, and you all can get down with that. That's cool. But in the end, who is a super fan who's going to say, my God, I'm glad you wrote this? So.
Love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Judy. So I didn't mention it out loud, but I did put Fallon and Judy, I put your links into the comments, and I'll be putting some more links in there later as it pertains to people's freebies and that kind of thing. So let's segue over here. Today is all about feedback and constructive criticism. And I feel like to some extent, editors can get a bad rap, right? That whole honesty thing really just throws people for a loop. So what's one thing that you would want to set the record straight about when it comes to editing and using constructive feedback to make a manuscript better? What's one, like a misconception, or like even just like a hell nah, like these things keep happening and you're like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm getting on my soapbox today and I'm going to just lay it out there for people. What's that thing that you want to like let people know? Oh, Kristy's got her hand up. All right, it's gonna be fiery.
It's that people think that their first draft is a final draft. I'm sorry, but your first draft is not a final draft. It could be a stream of consciousness, but it's weak. I call it a vomit draft. It's probably you vomiting your words all over the page. And very likely, if it's fiction, it doesn't have any structure. If it's nonfiction, it just rambles and goes off in directions and repeats itself over and over again. So your first draft is not a final draft. Your first draft is a starting point, and it's really good because even getting to a first draft is a big deal. Many people try and they can't even get past page 5, So, because writing a book is a daunting project. So give yourself credit for getting a first draft, and then get a professional that you resonate with that will help you get that book to where it's A, publishable, and B, consumable by the reader, because that's why you're doing it. You're not doing it so it sits on a shelf and nobody sees it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Oh my gosh. Just like my whole heart is like, preach. And I just want to add that maybe your second draft is also not your final draft, and maybe your third draft is also not your final draft. So like people will ask me how many drafts, and I'm like, I don't freaking know. How clean do you write? How specific you gonna get? How hard you gonna work? How dedicated you gonna be? Like, I don't know. We could be here 5 different times. We could be here 25. It could take you 3 months, depending on your situation. It could take you 3 years. Like, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you for sure that it's not going to be like one and done. Like, that's how I'm like, nope, no one and done's over here. If you're looking for a one and done person, you got to go shop somewhere else, because that's not happening on my watch. I love it. All right, Judy or Fallon, what's tugging at you?
Okay.
Go ahead, Judy.
I think going back to the authenticity piece, finding your voice takes time. And so if I come back to you and say, that's not how you talk. That's not how you told me about this story. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just saying there's something else in you. Be you. Don't be what your mom says, your dad says, your colleague says, none of that. Be you. And I think that's a struggle that writers really at any stage can struggle with, but especially aspiring writers, that sometimes they write as they think they're supposed to write. And sometimes it comes out stilted. it comes off, oh, you don't want that, but finding it once you get closer to it and you're on the journey to improving it and expressing it, it's a wonderful thing. But it is a struggle. And I want writers to know that you're not going to get that immediately, but you're going to get it if we keep on pressing. And each time we press, we'll get closer to what it looks like.
Love that. That's a great point.
I'm going to say it. I hate the word editing. I hate it so much. I think the word editing in a box implies that we're just going to take what you have and rearrange it. And that's not at all what content development, story development actually is. It's about revisioning or re-envisioning what the story means, because, we know the first draft is not the final draft, and it probably is shit, quite frankly. But we have the opportunity to take that shitty first draft and re-envision how powerful it could be for the reader. And then we don't edit the language that's there. We don't edit the story that's there. We figure out the story that should be there and make that story happen. And so, I don't even like to call myself an editor because that's not what I'm doing. I'm not cutting and pasting and moving shit around. I'm going to push you, and I'm going to push you to tell the story that you didn't tell the first time because you weren't brave enough to do it the first time. That's what I want, is that re-envisioning of what your book means, not only to you as a writer, but what it can mean to your audience.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to put that into a sound bite. Editing needs a redo.
Yeah. You're so right. You're so right that people think editing is, oh, I just need a quick proofread.
Mm-hmm.
And the first paragraph, I'm like, no. You need a complete rewrite. And it's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Malapropisms are also fun though. The best one I ever heard was I saw it on a sign and outside of a little store, and it said, "Shoplifters will be persecuted." I thought that was pretty funny malapropism.
I think along with so part of it, I think it's the language that we use, and it's a misconception of levels of editing or levels of manuscript development. And so I know with other publishers that I've talked to, they'll have authors will come to them because they think they're ready. And then the publisher has to say, you're not ready, right? And then the publisher will say, what you need is X. And then they'll go looking for it, and they'll just show up at any person's door that mentions that they do something, right? And not really knowing what that is. Just this week, somebody was referred to me for developmental editing. And I wrote back to explain what that meant to me and how I would look at the manuscript. And then however many email exchanges later, they were like, well, I would love a twofer. I'd love for you to do the developmental and then a copy edit. And I'm like, nowhere did I ever say I did copy editing, number one. Two, I wouldn't touch copy editing with a 100-foot pole. Totally different thing. But there's this idea that we do all of the things. If we can edit in one way, we can edit in all the ways, and we also like it. And I don't like the other types of editing. Believe in them wholeheartedly, want all of the editing on my own projects and my clients, but I don't touch any of the other levels. But for our aspiring authors who this is their first time, they haven't done the Google thing. They haven't talked to friends, I guess, who have gone through it or done it the right way. Editing just becomes this blanket term that comprises 1,500 different nuances. And not all manuscripts need the exact same type of editing, depending on where they're at and who their author is and the approach that's been taken. I feel like Judy has a thought bubble above her head, so I'm going to stop here and let her get.
Oh, you were reading my mind. I think he stepped into something too. These twofer ideas about editing, it gets into other things in terms of the value that an editor brings to you. So at any stage of the process, that role they play, whether it's copy editing, development editing, any kind of line, and however you want to divide all the stages, they have value at each stage. And sometimes people think we're just we just do it all and you'll do it one time and it's done. And it's not like that. The nuances, and I'm sorry, Fallon, for using editing, but the nuances of editing are so much deeper. And particularly when you're talking about developmental editing, because you are holding that person's hand in the muck, and it's just different when you get to proofreading or something like that. There are different processes. I would even say when you're coaching the person to get started is a version of editing, when you're just talking to them about the book and how to get your thoughts down. So this idea that we're the omnibus with everything really kind of gets in my car. So.
All right. So with all that being said, okay, what's your number one thing that you want your ideal client out there watching this to know about editing, getting feedback, working with you, receiving constructive criticism?
Well, our theme is bravery. And the fact of writing a book at all, that's a brave thing to do, especially if it's a memoir or something where you're really showing who you are. And but editing is worse. Because usually the first draft you're by yourself and it's just all coming out and it's like, it's this cathartic experience. But then you go to an editor and they're like, we got work to do. And it can feel, I've had people say, I feel like you're making me kill my babies. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually something we say. You kill your babies because they're not all gonna fit with this project. So it's brave. And your friend down the street who reads a lot is not going to be a good editor. So please, I know you're trying to save a buck, but if
don't.
It depends on what if you just want to publish the book for your family, okay. But if you want a real book out there for an audience where it's going to do something for you and for them, get a good editor. What do we call ourselves? Something else.
At least one.
Yeah, developer especially, because at the beginning, I have a copy editor that I send all the books to after I'm done. Yeah. And I tell them she's going to do all the little fixes that have to be done before it goes to publishing.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh. So there's two things here that I've just got to say out loud. So number one, there is no point in people skipping a developmental edit to go to a line edit or a copy edit because that's putting lipstick on a pig. Why on earth would you go and worry about sentence structure and syntax and word choice when the whole story doesn't even get told the right way and it's disorganized and it's chaotic? So folks, don't skip the actual content developmental edit that's going to help you make sure that the story is being told or the message is being delivered. All right? Like nobody wants lipstick on a pig. Nobody. The second thing here, right, is I find that anytime I've come across anybody who's like, oh, I had my avid reader friend or the person who taught high school English or the person who once studied writing 25 years ago, take a look at it. And because they don't know what type of feedback to ask for, what they inevitably end up getting from all of these English nuts that they know is like misplaced commas and, bad possession and maybe like a correction of verb choice or something. They're not necessarily looking at it in the way that you need them to when you're handing it to them, because you don't even know what you're trying to get for feedback because you're also unfamiliar with the process. So now we've got the blind leading the blind, and you're tapping somebody who has no business giving you feedback at the stage that you're at. So please spend a buck, spend several bucks. If you're going to spend a huge investment in your book project at any point in time, spend it here, working with someone who can look at your manuscript developmentally and make sure that it is where it needs to be. Amen. Praise Jesus. All the time.
I'm going to add to that, Allie, because there was a Goodreads survey from a few years ago, and I'll never find the link again because that's how my brain works. But it was a reader-focused survey about reasons why readers put books down and just walk away from them. Copy editing was bottom of the friggin' barrel. I mean, bottom barrel. We're talking, I mean, readers are looking for character development. They're looking for world building. They're looking for message. They're looking for thematic elements. They're looking for all of the big picture stuff that book developers specifically work on. Some of that does come in the line craft, because the act of writing is not just about putting the right things in the right spots. It's also about communicating them effectively, but that does not include copy editing. And I hear so many times that authors, you know, I'm saving my budget for copy editing. Why? Why would you piss off 94% of your potential readers to appease the 6% who are pedantic and need the commas in the exact right places? People don't talk so good. We're all normal people. We all have like weird things that we say, you know. I use that phrase at home. Like, I said what I said. Sometimes words come out of my mouth in the wrong order. You know, and that's just normal. That's normal. And that's part of, I think, the authenticity that we're talking about too, is like being able to deliver a message in your words, in your voice, in a way that feels good for you. Copy editing is not part of this conversation. I don't have a copy editor following me around correcting my comma placement as I'm like speech pausing. This is not a thing. We don't need to be worried about this. Put the value, put the dollars where the reader value lies, and develop that story, because the reader will overlook typos. They will overlook incorrect comma placement. They will overlook absent punctuation altogether, you know, in a catastrophic situation. But they won't overlook a flat character. They just won't. That's a closure book, and I'm not buying anything from that author again. So don't do that to yourself. Don't end the game before you even get started playing.
Yeah, mic drop. Also, if you've got a first draft that you're hitting publish on, you're guaranteeing some people are gonna be real pissed off with you. Like, because it will be all of the things that cannot be overlooked that are happening on the page. Okay. And even if we think of books, and I'm trying to think of one that would be an example of like kind of stream of consciousness style. And for some reason, Catcher in the Rye comes to mind, but I don't even know if that's 100% accurate, because it's been eons since I read that book. Sure. But even that style is a craft choice. So it might look and read like stream of consciousness, but the reason people don't get pissed off about it is because it's been intentionally crafted in a particular way to work. It doesn't mean that you can do it. Yes. So please, no first draft, no like going right after the copy editing crap if your manuscript is not where it needs to be. Judy, anything more to throw in here before we move on to this next question?
Mic drop for Fallon.
All right. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this and then come up with all of the things that should be on t-shirts, coffee mugs, visors. We can have a whole line, starting with, you know, I don't hate you, I'm just honest. Still one of my favorite pieces today. Okay. So what I want to talk about is, what are the characteristics or traits that authors should be looking for when they're selecting their ideal partner? And I'm going to use the word partner because truly I feel that these are partnerships and collaborations. And we're going to take the word editor out of here. Moving it. Done with you, stupid word that doesn't mean anything. So what should people really be looking for? What are the characteristics and traits you would want them to be showing up to the call and using as a filter or vetting system to choose their people to put on their team?
Well, my best clients are the ones that know that they're there. They're like, tell me the truth because I want to make this good. And there's a communication. I've had to fire clients before that had something in their head that they weren't communicating. And then when I'm telling them something they didn't want to hear, they argued with me about how I didn't see their vision. And I'm like, yeah, it's not my job to see your vision. It's your job as the author to communicate your vision. And if I don't see it, you think people out there in the world are going to see it? So there has to be a two-way communication. That's a big deal. And I love it when they ask questions, because if they don't understand why I'm telling them something, ask me why, so that I can explain to you why we're doing what we're doing, and then you can move into it with it making sense, as opposed to the old teacher school way of just do it because I gave you the assignment. That doesn't work. but that's my biggest thing, is communication between both people, that so that it is a collaboration and not just me just like slaving away at something with them not telling me what's going on, or them not getting it and feeling resentful and weird because they don't get it.
I feel like what's really interesting is this could go either way, right? You could have the person who comes in who's like, oh, I trust you, like, just do whatever you think is best. And then there's no ownership over vision or what they're trying to do. And then you're kind of like, why are you even writing this book if you don't give a crap about what I make? Why am I making all the final decisions when you are like, you know, the CEO of the manuscript, right? On the reverse is the person who won't take any of the feedback, right? Because they're more wedded to their ego. See, I told you ego was going to come up. Then they are, you know, actually doing right by the manuscript, which needs to kind of stand on its own, like outside of you, even though you're the author of it. So I love these things. So look for someone honest, even if it hurts. Ensure there's two-way communication, and for the love of God, ask questions. Like, this is a partnership, not a dictatorship. All right. Your person you're choosing is not going to just point and tell you what to do with it. You've got to be in there, asking questions, getting curious, and being the owner of this thing. It's yours. Fallon, Judy, what would you tell people? What should they be looking for?
That editing it's not linear, and it doesn't need to be linear, and it's not a one and done step-by-step process. And I think so many, especially newer authors, come into an editorial relationship with their chosen collaborator, believing that, yeah, I'm going to have one developmental edit, and then I'm going to have one line edit, and then I'm going to have one copy edit or proof, and then I'm done. False. No, get that out of your head. That's not a thing. That's not ever been a thing. And I understand that there are budget limitations, and there are reasons that people need to get as much out of an editorial pass as they absolutely can. That's, you know, I'm thinking about that constantly. How can I give the most value for, you know, for the money that the client is spending? But at the same time, every single time you read through that manuscript, if there is something that needs to be changed, it needs to be changed, period. Whether you've already gone through the developmental edit and whether you're moving on to something else, if you notice it, somebody else has noticed it already, and probably multiple someone's. And it's probably being talked about and maybe isn't so great for conversation. So be willing to invest your time in that process. Be willing to show up consistently and talk through what you want and talk through each pass of the process, and be willing to develop your manuscript over and over and over again. Because if you're willing to work through content development in sort of a circular model, you will almost negate the need for language and copy editing. Almost. Because if you really develop the story and really develop the voice and really develop the language, the line craft is already done for you and you're doing it yourself. So put that time and investment into developing your own skills while you're working with that professional collaborator, because the value that you're going to get is not just this one book that's clean and polished. It is the number of lessons you're going to take with you when you write your second book, because now you know how it's done. Now you know what the time looks like. Now you know what that investment looks like. And now you know the hard work that goes into it from start to finish. And you've sort of learned all of that process at once. And that's what I want people to come away with, understanding that, you know, we're really talking about a deeply intimate relationship for a long time. I tell clients, you know, when they come and work with me, I'll get you about 90% of the way there. There are things that I can't touch because I can't see the problems anymore. I'm not seeing your comma drama. I'm not a copy editor. I'm not looking for that. But I am going to work with you on your characters over the long haul because it's necessary. And so, you know, get rid of the idea that it's this linear, you know, step-by-step process, and, you know, understand that it is a time and emotional investment, and it's a circular process, and it needs to be done slowly and steadily and in a way that makes sense and feels good.
Oh my gosh, so many great points. Also, I love comma drama. I'm gonna take that. I'll give you full credit, of course. I love, though, that you mentioned, you know, that it's not linear. I love that you mentioned that this is a long process, right? So really, you want to find the person that you can stand to work with, right, for a long time, because it ain't a one and done. So if it's going to be a 1 and then 15, right, you need to find the person that you can stand to work with for 15 drafts and still like each other at the end of the day, right? And really be in there together. And I also love that you mentioned, you know, that you will get better and you will learn, and you know that you're not going to make the same mistakes in chapter 10 that you were making in chapter 1, because by then you're finding your own rhythm, you're finding your own way, you're sharpening your skill. I mean, people forget that writing is something that can be practiced and therefore developed. You know, I think there's a belief like, well, you're either a natural writer or you're not. And it might be true that you can have natural tendencies towards words or writing, but it's bullshit to think that you can't get better at it if you actually apply yourself, right? And work with somebody who can make it joyful again. I think people draw some hard lines in the sand for themselves about like, I'm not a strong writer from some like 4th grade red mark situation that they haven't, you know, let go of yet. Judy, what do you want to bring to
I think you want this on both sides. You don't want an ego-driven editor and you don't want an ego-driven author. So whoever side you are. Let me deal with the ego-driven editors for a minute. If they're all about them, do not choose them to be your partner in your writing project. If they think they're the literary king and queen of whatever mountain they're at, leave them the heck alone. That is not who you need in the trenches with you. But also too, for editors, we try not to choose ego-driven authors who think that you can't touch a word, let alone a comma, but you can't touch a paragraph because, you know, it's inviolate, you know, it's something to it, you know, I don't know, it's got some kind of superpower that no one can ever get to. You really want people who leave their egos outside of that relationship, so that during that very time-intensive process, we're talking as colleagues, as collaborators to try and get this done, where we can say, I need to take a break, says the editor. I'm just taking a little bit longer to get to this passage. Are you cool with that? And the author can say yes, or vice versa. It's really hard for me to get those rewrites done. I'm just not feeling it. Let's keep moving. But ego gets in the way of that. If nothing can be touched, if everything has to be on a certain schedule, and if it has to read, you know, like some classic, you know, author, you just pick one, or some current contemporary literary genius, pick one. I would like to tell authors, you are genius in yourself. Whatever you're sharing is genius. Whatever you're sharing about your world is genius. And by that, I mean, it matters to you and it matters to the people that you're writing for. And it's really important to know that, but that doesn't mean you have to come at it like it's my stuff and it can't ever be touched. And you don't need to work with someone who says, I can't stand your stuff unless I edit it into oblivion. It's not going to matter to anyone. So those would be the things I would say.
Oh my gosh, 100%. Like, yeah, that ego piece does go both ways. And I do think like, yeah, if you're choosing a partner who's not willing to listen and just wants to do whatever they want to do because they think that it matters, you know, to do it that way. Like now we've got a whole problem with, you know, who owns the vision, right? Whose piece is it? And honoring, you know, the original intention or mission or whatever of the author who's shown up with a manuscript. You know, at the end of the day, the author, right? I don't want to say the customer is always right, but the author is the CEO of that manuscript. They get to make the final executive decision, at least with people who work with me. I will say, look, from my lens of expertise, this is what I would suggest. Ultimately, the decision is yours. But here's the information in order for you to make an informed decision. What you decide is what you decide, right? And then we move forward, right? But it's not for me to be like, well, I would do it this way and you ought to do it this way because I said so. Like, right. I'm not here to be a mom, okay? I'm here to empower some people to make some really good decisions about their books and to also empower them to make that decision and stand by that decision regardless if they decide to disagree with whatever, you know, my recommendation is to begin with. Yeah, Judy.
Can I add one more to that? Because you're right. Because I don't want to infer that it is not their decision. And the thing is, I'm sure all of us have had decisions like that where we have given our recommendation and the client has not taken it. That's not the ego I'm referring to. I'm referring to those who they're cray-cray about the entire process. But it is important to be able to step back because when you act as an editor who's not ego driven, you can give your opinion and your recommendation, and you can step back and you give the cleanest version of a manuscript for them, and the rest of the decision is theirs. And I can't tell you how many times that has happened, where someone has chose differently than what I've recommended. But ego does not play a part in that for me to be a queen over that and just, talk bad about them later.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad that you jumped back in. I wasn't trying to imply that that's what you meant, but
I'm glad
that we cleared that up though. So I just want to acknowledge that Sarah is in the comments here over on YouTube saying great tips. Thanks for the live show. I've asked if she's got any questions while the three of you are still with me for a couple more moments. And LaShawn is also with us. I love LaShawn. And she says, I love that you ladies identified which partner to choose, how authors should operate, and what editing actually is, with a heart emoji. And she'd also says that she's going to buy our mugs and tote bags. So we already got our first buyer. So we got a product line. We got to get to work. Like, we're going to get off here and just start a whole other side hustle. All right, let's do a rapid fire before we wrap up, and just to give Sarah and LaShawn a couple more seconds to think if there's anything specific they want to ask. I want to hear from each of you what the most difficult thing is when it comes to you having to provide that constructive feedback. What's the most challenging piece when you're working with a client and you got to give them some truth?
Handling emotions. Sometimes, developing a story comes with big emotions. The process of writing is often the author telling themselves what they needed to hear or what they need to hear. And that's not always the same as what the reader is going to need. Short from writing a book that you're going to give to your grandchildren as a keepsake, we're writing for readers here. We're writing for, the future reader that we maybe haven't identified yet, but we know is waiting at some point for this powerful story. They're going to need to hear this message, and they need to hear it in a way that's accessible for them. And sometimes the way that the author communicates is only accessible to the author. It's done in such a way that, this is a really personal story for me. But it's like, but I put up your block here, because right now I need you to dig into that a little bit. I need you to go into that emotional place, and I need you to understand that, this is part of your story that your reader doesn't need. This part of your story that is important to you is slowing down your narrative. This is tangential to the message that you're trying to deliver. Like the memoirist who handed me 130,000 word manuscript, which I pared down to 50,000 and sent it back, because it's a big deal. There's a lot of experience that goes into, a life well lived, but not all of those experiences are on theme and on message and sort of part of the big plan for the work. Having, I guess the difficulty is understanding what that plan is and helping the author stick to that plan all the way through without getting sidetracked by this thing over here, or shiny object syndrome over here, or what if I just added this thing over here? Breathe for just a minute and understand that everything that you're writing follows this central thread. And if it doesn't communicate effectively along that central thread, it's got to go. Otherwise, it dilutes the message and you're going to lose people. And nobody wants to lose a reader before they've ever found them.
Mm-hmm. Gorgeous. I like to call it, don't make your book a dumpster fire. Because ain't nobody going diving in there to find what they want to keep and just ignoring the rest. No.
Your reader is not a trash panda. We're not scavenging here.
Oh my gosh. Next best line also going on. No dumpster fires. Your reader is not a trash panda. Okay. I love it. Okay. So moving on, Judy, Kristy, what's the hardest thing about giving constructive feedback?
I totally agree. It's handling their emotions in a way where, not just, I think through how I'm going to present something to them that they don't want to hear, so that I can give it to them like, here's the problem. This is why it's a problem. And here's how we're going to fix it. Think about that. Let's talk about that and get them focused on solutions rather than on, you just killed one of my babies and you don't. So again, that comes back to the client ego is you gotta be willing, if you want that book to be good, you've got to be willing to face the parts that aren't good and and let it go and move on. So yeah, I totally agree. The emotions in a gentle but brutally honest way.
All right, Judy, let's wrap up with.
I think I would say for both of those, I think they've said it well. I would put it under the umbrella of managing expectations for the writer. That is the hardest part. That in that beginning conversation, and then definitely all through the process and at the end, managing that expectation. All of us don't get to write the great debut novel or the great debut business book, managing that expectation, but you can write a solid one. You can have a useful one. You can have one that ministers to people, so to speak, and really means is very meaningful, but really managing expectation, I think, is really key.
100%. All right. It's the top of the hour. I actually have to jump to a client call, but I want to just acknowledge that Kristy, Fallon, and Judy's links are in the comments. If you're catching this from LinkedIn, they'll be there later today. We also had Laura that was with us earlier. I just saw, and she had to jump early, but she was loving the conversation. She said she'd come back and catch the replay, and she loved the idea of that first draft being a vomit drop. So we've just got catchphrases galore from today's, open book broadcast. I'm pumped to be coming back again next month. And next month's topic is going to be on outing yourself in your writing. I'm super pumped. So that's going to be June 11th at 10:15. Bravery and outing yourself in your writing. I realize there's a typo there in that banner, but I'm not going to fix it at the moment. So Kristy, Judy, Fallon, thank you so much for being with me today. This was a freaking fantastic and so much fun conversation to have. And I hope that you all find your ideal clients out of all of the wisdom and honesty that you shared today. So thanks for being with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, world. We'll see you next time.
Take care.